You ready, Bob? Yes, sir. Okay. We'll go ahead and call the Basin Management Committee meeting of June 15th to order. And could we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Bill, I'll let you have it this time.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have the secretary take the roll now.
Great, thank you. Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Garfinkel.
Here.
Director Zimmer.
Here.
Chairman Ohilsky.
Present. Okay, with that then we'll go to item number 4 on our agenda, which is board member comments. So I usually start with that end, Bruce, but we'll start with your end today.
I have nothing.
Okay. There has been a comment raised to me that I just want to bring up for our consideration in the future here, but we do have Rob serving as executive director, but we have never looked at how we're going to deal with this in the long term. He was the short-term executive director, so I think it's something that we need to, in future agendas, start bringing up as to how we're going to deal with that in the long term. So I just want to raise that as an issue that we do need to address.
We probably should include in that conversation just the whole topic of staff.
Yes, I agree. So if we could just, not as necessarily an agenda item for next month, but at least something that we have to consider here. And
Succession plan? Generational transfer.
However you want. How about just transitional? How's that? But anyways, I do want to raise that because when we did have Rob agree to do this, it was only on a temporary and interim basis, not as a permanent basis. And as Bill rightly brings up, we do have to look at staffing issues because Rob's doing everything by himself right now. So, okay. All right. With that, then, we'll go ahead and move to the consent agenda. Rob, would you please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have minutes in front of you, including corrected minutes from your April meeting. Perhaps as we consider this item, we can think a little bit about future minutes, including the content of this meeting. I know there was brief discussion last time about whether we would be going back to action minutes because we are now videotaping the meetings and have a more complete and accessible public record. So I'd throw that out there for consideration. Other than that, you have the minutes in front of you, and you also have, say, the next generation of the budget and warrants and invoice register, although in this case we actually noted those invoices which have not yet been approved for payment, and so those are itemized for your consideration here today.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have any questions on these items? Bill?
No.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Rob, for putting that together and putting it in there. And just a couple small details I don't want to add to your labor that you're already doing, but
do it.
Do you think it would be better to have this as a separate attached item outside of the agenda, similar to the other attachments for the ledger? That was the only thing I was thinking, is just that it's incorporated into the agenda item, but having a separate attachment.
Sure, be happy to do that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, thank you for doing that. And then just some of the names were a little bit, I was looking at one for the South Bay Community Center, and then below that it's SBCC, so just a little clerical.
Spell out the alphabet soup, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Does anybody want to pull an item before we go to public comment? Okay. No? Okay, seeing none, then we'll go to public comment on the consent agenda, which is the minutes and the warrants, budget update, and invoice register.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I turned it down. Good afternoon, everybody. Bob Lloyd with AGP Video. I just want to thank you for letting us videotape these process. This meeting will be broadcast at 1 p.m. Every day, so everybody can watch. Of course, it's also available online as well, not as a video on demand, but you're basically watching the broadcast of Channel 20. So you can go to the Los Osos CSD website or our website and be able to watch this at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, Richard?
The minutes of May 25th, without getting scolded, under public comment, Marcia, I think you know me well enough that I would have never said Richard Margerson raised a point of not needing detailed minutes if the meetings were videotaped. I never said that.
Cool. Where is that? Are you asking, Richard, can I ask a question? Because I'm not following what you're, I can't find that in the minutes, quite frankly.
Public comments number 8.
Number 8. Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Yeah, I think we should just go ahead and delete that first sentence.
You got it.
And as far as going back to action minutes, I think you should keep it the same way. There still are people in this community, and if Gwen Taylor was here, she'd be making that point, that don't have computers, that don't have charter. As much transparency as we can have, the better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the committee. So can I have a motion to accept to approve the consent agenda? I'm so used to saying accept the administrative reports. I'm sorry,
So moved. Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the 2 items on the consent agenda and a second. Can we have a...
Director Gibson?
Yes.
Director Garfinkel?
Yes.
Director Zimmer?
Yes.
Chairman Ohelski?
Yes. Okay, with that then, we'll move to item number 6, which is the Executive Director's Report. And we'll turn it over to Rob for that.
Really give me a minute here to get my bearings. There we go. So many of the updates that would normally be in the Executive Director's Report are included in other agenda items today, since we'll be talking about water conservation later on, as well as the annual report. So just a brief update, not a lot of new information to report on the zone and benefit analysis, just that they're still working through their first deliverable, and as soon as we have that ready, we'll bring it forward. Again, we're still hoping for the July meeting for DTA's first financial analysis. We did have an initial discussion with WSC now that they're under contract to help fine-tune their strategy for grant pursuits, Prop 1 being one of the key items that they're looking carefully at. And so they're formulating their first draft written strategy, and they'll bring that forward. We'll have them attend one of our meetings here to talk about the various programs that they think would be good to pursue. We continue to await detailed comment from Department of Water Resources, which I think is going to be here next week. Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong. We're expecting comments very shortly from DWR on the basin boundary modification, and we'll bring that forward when we have it. And then on the creek discharge, we did provide a final draft of the report, the product that Michael Nunley and Associates was putting together to Division of Drinking Water, and once we get final comments on that, we'll get them to stamp that report and bring that back as a final document for your consideration. And that concludes my Executive Director's report.
Any questions on the Executive Director's report?
Yeah, I have a question on the creek discharge. So the follow-up next steps, what are those next steps? What's going to happen next?
So if we get a positive read from Division of Drinking Water on our assumptions, we met with them, we heard clearly from them that 2-year horizon, that travel time horizon, was the threshold they were looking to define the character of our project. And we've now put that in a written format and have sent it back to them for confirmation. If they confirm that, then I think we have a very clear set of domestic wells to focus on. One property owner impacted. Initial meetings with that property owner have been positive in terms of providing them, say, an alternative supply of domestic water were we to move forward on that. So our next step will be a budget and a timeline for schematic design and environmental review, which we will bring forward as soon as we get that confirmation from the state.
Yeah, I had a question. Any other questions? I had a question on the same issue I raised last time, which is the boundary modifications issues. What it says in here is that nothing has happened, but there's going to be a 30-day public comment, or pardon me, there's going to be a release of the boundary modifications in late June, followed by public meetings in mid-July. Is that going to be a local meeting, or is that going to be in Sacramento, or do you know how that's going to? I just like a better idea of how that's going to play out.
I think it's worth spending a few minutes to answer that. Ray or Kathy, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but if you know how that might play out, if not, we can bring it back to a future meeting, but take your best shot at it.
I'd just like to understand the process, because the way I read this right here, it talks about it's going to the California Water Commission on July 20th, and I assume that's at a meeting in Sacramento. So
we have 3 different public meetings.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So this is Kathy Martin from San Luis Obispo County. So they have 3 public meetings for the basin boundary modification, and I think July, is it June 20th? They come maybe to a resolution on what's being done, from what I understand.
It says late June in here, but...
Yeah, so it could be a little bit later. They're still going through the process, though, for our basin here.
So, but would there be local public hearings, or only...
No, it's only the 3 regions. Probably the Central Valley, Sacramento area, and one more area, probably in L.A., probably.
Okay, so the hearing that will ultimately be held will be held in Sacramento, is that correct?
Probably, yes.
Okay. Yeah, Bruce?
And, Mr. Chairman, I think it's well to point out, and all the members of the committee may know this, but the county did write an extensive letter pushing back on the letter from the State Water Board. So a great deal of technical information was forwarded to DWR that addressed the concerns raised by Mr. Ekdahl of the State Water Board. And I think, in fact, I know that we have been in conversations with Mr. Ekdahl to point out where our technical basis is for these is sound, perhaps much sounder than he gave us credit for. So we're in conversation. We have the necessary information in front of DWR for them to make a well-reasoned discussion.
Great. Okay. Good.
No, that would be great. And the reason I'm asking is because if we need to be able to prepare to have somebody attend, either from this committee or from the county, I think that's why I wanted to know where the meeting was going to be, so we could make prior arrangements for that.
And I would ask Ms. Martin, I think we circulated that county letter to everybody, didn't we? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On that issue, how did you circulate? I didn't see a copy of that or anything like that, of the county letter.
Oh, I can forward you a copy.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No,
it went out on the first mule of the week before last,
It's a really, I mean, there's a lot of documentation there.
Yeah, it's a pretty abundant letter we sent out.
Okay.
It may be good to go ahead and post that to the BMC website, too, so folks can have a look at it.
Will do.
That'd be great. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
So I guess at our next meeting, we'll have to consider whether or not we want to send somebody up to that July meeting or not. I'm just trying to see, what day is that? The July 20th day. That would be the 3rd. Luckily enough, that's the day of our next meeting.
Oh, is it really?
The same day.
It is the same day. Okay.
Yes, it is. So I think we may want to look at changing our meeting date, because I think the attendance at that meeting will probably be critical, depending on what their depending on what they come out with as their final recommendation. So let's just leave that date in play at this point, but I think, like I said, if they're going to stick with their original recommendation on altering the boundaries, then I do think we need to have representation at that hearing.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, thank you. Sorry to get way off task on that.
No, I think you're still on point.
Okay, so we'll go to public comment then on the Executive Director's report. No. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. You did a good job, Rob. All right, then we'll go to our action items. We have 2 action items. We're item 7 on the agenda. First of all, we have the receive and discuss Chapter 10 of the draft 2015 annual report, and then secondly, we have an update on the Water Conservation Program. So, Rob, let's go ahead and talk about Chapter 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is an item that we wanted to bring forward, a draft. In fact, when we realized we wouldn't have the totality of the report ready for you today, we thought about delaying the meeting until the end of June, but I thought better of that when I saw the content of this draft. Even though it's short, there are a few items in here that are definitely worth discussing before we get to the finish line. So I have a few slides prepared just to focus us in on some of the elements in Chapter 10 for those who may not have had a chance to read it or who want an overview. A quick scheduling update. Cleith Harris Geologists is working through comments that they've received from the various staff. Nothing major, just formatting issues and style and the way things are presented. Some technical comments from Golden State that are helpful, and they think they'll have that done sometime next week, by the end of the week. So time's getting fairly short in order to adopt the annual report, but we do plan to discuss the timing of a special meeting at the end of this agenda item. We can look at calendars and see if we can't get on the same page. Right now it looks like everybody's possibly available on the 30th, which was last day of June. We made sure we got some input from the various legal counsels, and they've uniformly advised us that the report can be submitted as soon as available. It doesn't have to be right on June 30. The court's certainly not tracking this schedule closely, and we can, as long as we're making diligent progress, submit it as soon as it's available, which is what's done in many of the other local court-established groups. Those annual reports, for whatever reason, sometimes get pushed back on the stipulated date. So as soon as possible. We don't want to get too far beyond the end of June. So Chapter 10. So in Chapter 10, we basically looked to restate the objectives of the plan and the metrics to have one clearinghouse. In fact, you'll see some of the same content in the executive summary, because the purpose of this chapter is to bring it all together to answer the question, how are we doing, and do we need to change what we're doing to have the desired effect? So a restatement of our objectives and a summary of the status of the various programs. That's actually in the stipulation, in the judgment itself, that we provide a status update to the court on where we sit on the programs. And then the important next steps are there, even though there's some minimal language, it's very important language for completing the full adaptive management framework, which we hope to tackle this calendar year. It's not all in this chapter, of course, because we need to talk about it in public in quite some detail. So here are some of the objectives of adaptive management. A lot of these are very familiar to you, but of course evaluating all the trends. And as we compile more and more historical data, as we get more under our belt, we will be bringing to you trend lines for every key threat to the basin. Identifying additional data needs and gaps. We've already done that to some extent. In the draft annual report you saw at the last meeting, we certainly know that we have dead zones, so to speak, where we need more monitoring wells, and that's an important component of adaptive management. A good example of this would be areas in the lower aquifer where we're inferring seawater intrusion but not measuring it. And we want to make sure we get actual monitoring wells there to get data points where needed. Reporting the data out to interested parties, I think folks who are stakeholders in the basin, the regulatory community, including the State Board, DWR, would all take an interest in our data analysis. And then modify the basin plan programs and schedule as needed in response to actual conditions and trends. So, of course, this would not be taken lightly because a lot of work and thought went into the programs as they currently sit. But if something is not meeting the criteria that we've set forth, we can consider changes and modifications to those programs. One example of that might be we have programs designed for future development in the community, and yet our water projections that are in the basin plan now seem awfully outdated because folks are using a lot less water than even our projected conservation numbers were predicting. Modify procedures to utilize the best management practices. There is a move in certain basins in California to use software that sort of integrates all the data, analyzes it in more of a holistic fashion. As better data and better analysis techniques come in, we want to be able to say that we're on the cutting edge, or at least decently with the current technology, so we can get the best benefit that we can. Modify pumping treatment or reuse procedures if the trends are showing degradation of water quality, more contamination, or more seawater intrusion. That's to say that we're not just talking about putting things on paper in terms of future programs. There may be times when we have to modify practices, pumping practices, and or implement mandatory water conservation among the purveyors. We've done some of that, but there could be times where in response to conditions, we don't necessarily change the basin plan, but we change our practices to respond to shorter long-term conditions. This is just a summary table that will be, I think, providing year over year as to the various basin plan programs. And I'll just run through these, though they're known to many of you. In terms of Program A, our water system interconnection project between Golden State and the district recently got the long-awaited inter-party agreement approved, and the design is already complete and all on the shelf, and the project is funded. So we're looking for construction to be completed on that. We're saying March 2017. But the agreement just got approved at the last CSD meeting, and so we're happy to see that moving forward. The CSD's upper aquifer well at 8th Street is out for public bid on the drilling portion of that, and that's a funded project, and we'll be looking to bring a recommendation for award back to the district board here in the coming month or so, and then construction of that drilling would be ongoing to the end of the year, certainly complete by June of next year. Once we drill that well, we'll give some update to this group once the district has looked at it as to the quality and quantity that was obtained, because we're certainly hoping the well will be appropriate for blending without further treatment. South Bay well nitrate removal and the Palisades well modifications were already completed. Golden State's blending project is also complete, and they're currently looking, as I think Director Zimmer indicated last meeting, to finish the planning phase of their nitrate removal component of that project and look to fully implement that. It's a funded project, and we have a current date of June 2017. Mark, you can let us know if that's too ambitious for you, but I think that's a decent date. Water meters at S&T are complete, and then we get into some of our Program C projects. The first expansion well, deep aquifer well on our east side, is in construction, funded by Golden State Water Company, and is expected to be online shortly, September of this year. The further expansion wells 2 and 3 are in property acquisition and siting and environmental review associated with those efforts, and the funding of those would be pending either a funding vote or some alternative means of funding. So those are not fully funded at this point, and so we put an estimated date range on there. take a break. Thank you. A water system interconnection between Golden State and S&T is in the conceptual phase, and they're looking to move that forward, and that also is not a fully funded element at this point, but they're looking for project completion around 2017. Again, both Director Zimmer and Garfinkel let me know if that schedule seems good to you. So 3 items which are next steps for working out all of the critical details of adaptive management. And these are very important items, each of these. And so they're worth discussing in some detail, and I'll walk through them. In fact, on the second item, we've got a guest today in Carrie Brown, who's been working on the Los Osos community plan, and she was gracious enough to come and provide us an update as to the schedule of that plan and maybe answer a few questions, interact with us as it relates to one of the bullets here. So let me walk through these. So over the next 6 months, we hope to accomplish these 3 key points in terms of a written plan for adaptive management, which will go into next year's annual report. And the first is familiar to this committee because you've seen it in previous meetings, and that is to have a contingency plan and actions in place that look at the trends and different action points, similar to what's happened in at least the district's water shortage contingency plan, and then in many similar plans in other local communities with groundwater issues. We're looking to put a real action plan in place that would respond to physical conditions and have some more defined milestones, I guess you could say, for our basin plan goals. We have some general milestones in the basin plan, but now those are getting a little bit stale as things have moved, and it's time to update those milestones and provide more specificity where we can. The second bullet is to provide input into the Los Osos community plan, and I'll invite Carrie to join me here pretty soon. In fact, Carrie, if you'd like, come out and join me at the dais here. I'll cue you up here in a second. But to understand at what point this committee should be interacting with the community plan, providing constructive input. I'll flash up the coastal development permit condition here in a second so everyone can see the language there, and give Carrie a chance to give us an update after that slide. And then the third item here is to consider as needed additional metrics or numerical goals to protect our upper aquifer from water quality threats. One of the things that we saw in a last meeting is that there are some water elevations near the coast in our upper aquifer which maybe aren't as high as we would like for pumping that occurs right at the coast. And so this is one example of where we want to carefully look at seawater intrusion potential in our upper aquifer. Of course, there's no evidence of that at this point, but we want to be vigilant and perhaps put some more things in place as watch points for the upper zone. I'd like to not necessarily read through the totality of this slide, but I think I will anyways. So in the wastewater project coastal development permit, there was detailed discussion as to what it would mean to begin to connect vacant properties, a very important step in the community. And one of the special conditions within the coastal permit, specifically authored as part of that final Coastal Commission action, is this one. And in understanding its meaning and how we would perhaps participate with it, we've invited Carrie to come. So I'll just read it here. So wastewater service to undeveloped properties within the service area, that's of the sewer project, shall be prohibited unless and until the Estero Area Plan, which is now called the Los Osos Community Plan, is amended to identify appropriate and sustainable build-out limits and any appropriate mechanisms to stay within such limits based on conclusive evidence indicating that adequate water is available to support development of such properties without adverse impacts to ground and surface waters, including wetlands and all related habitats. So pretty thorough condition there. And Carrie, I thought you could just give us an update. You might need to push the button. Let us know where you're at.
Hello, Carrie Brown, County Planning Staff. I am the project manager for the Los Osos Community Plan, and we have a public review draft out. It's been out for over a year now. It was released in January of last year. We're currently working on the environmental impact report, and that's expected to be completed in the fall of this year, with hearings potentially starting next year, probably around April, starting with Planning Commission and then on to the Board of Supervisors. The way the public review draft handles water and handles this condition is we're really relying on the basin management plan to be successfully implemented. And we actually had spelled out specific programs that needed to happen in order to allow so much development. But due to comments received from the Coastal Commission, they actually wanted us to be a little less specific and say there needs to be adequate water. But of course that is tied to the basin management plan. So we're going to craft it a little bit differently, and we'd like to we see our growth management ordinance as a tool to allow development in Los Osos, but we've been considering having the Basin Management Committee make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors based on the programs that have been implemented, and that would then be a trigger to allow development in the future. And so that's what we've been considering as a way to deal with new development.
That's very good. And so the timing of when you would need a recommendation, your best guess?
Right away.
Oh.
I mean, of course you guys will take your time, but it would be nice to incorporate any of your recommendations in the next draft, which would be a public hearing draft.
Okay, understood.
What's the timing for that, release of that draft?
The public hearing draft's probably not till next year when we start hearing.
So if we could do something in 3 months,
I think 3 months we can handle.
Okay, I'm trying to pin you down.
Yeah.
All right, 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
Great. While Carrie's up here, any other questions for her before I go on to the remainder of the presentation, maybe?
I did have a question. It's sort of like a comment and a question, but I think the crux of the matter, and we talked about this on the Technical Advisory Committee and with the Coastal Commission hearings, and then we talked about it in our stipulated judgment committee, but really the question becomes, what does conclusive evidence mean? So I think that's the issue that we're going to have to address, because we talked about whether that means modeling or how that actually gets defined. So I think if we're going to look at this over the next 3 months, that becomes the critical point. I'm just trying to, would you agree with that, Karen?
Yes, I would, yeah.
Okay.
What is successful?
Right.
To find that would be...
So that's what we should be working on over the next 90-day period. Okay. Bruce?
Well, I think we have a couple of pieces of framework. One of them is we have our basin metrics. And so I think we should transmit to planning the essence of our management plan. Health of the basin, sustainability of the water source is reflected in our basin metrics, and our completed and anticipated actions to bring those basin metrics to a place where they indicate a healthy and sustainable water supply. I think the other thing we have here, and it's a big level policy thing that eventually I think counties in general are going to have to engage with the Coastal Commission, is the relation of SGMA compliance to the question of sustainability of water supplies. It's my personally held view at this point that the Coastal Commission should be accepting that a basin that is SGMA compliant and moving toward its sustainability and appropriate metrics indicating such should be adequate evidence of a resource that should be available for development. Now, that's not established at this point, and it's going to require conversation at state levels up and down the coast to get there. I happen to chair a regional association of the 15 counties in the coastal zone, and we will be bringing that up as we go along. It does raise the question, we made application to DWR for Sigma compliance based, or I know it's not exactly an exemption, I think maybe compliance is the right word, based on the ISJ and the Basin Management Plan, and I'm not sure when we expect to hear confirmation that that's been accepted or not.
Right, unclear at this point. They've not committed to any schedule for that review. That's good input, though.
Yeah, but I think, again, if we can look at this over the next 90 days to be able to at least get you some thoughts that we think should be incorporated into the community plan. I just wanted to get the time frame from you, and then I think we're all in agreement on what the issue is. It's just a question of how do we address that issue.
Good. Thank you.
So, Gary, if you can stay for public comment, I'd appreciate it, but I think you're off of our dais right now.
Great.
I can go.
Thank you. Okay, Rob.
So anticipated schedule for our next steps. The contingency plan and related actions, I thought, based on the amount of information we already have available, that we should be able to bring that to you in August to begin that discussion. It seemed doable to me. Input to the Los Osos community plan. I actually didn't hear Carrie's response beforehand, but I thought there would probably be some level of time pressure on it, and so proposed to bring that first discussion to you at your next meeting. And then for upper aquifer protection, perhaps following on the heels of the contingency plan. This is not to imply that we'll have these things complete on those dates, but for the initial staff work and introduction and input from the various technical staff of the parties here, we think we can perhaps meet these milestones. I believe that would conclude my update of Chapter 10. If you had any detailed comments on the text in Chapter 10, if it's something that requires public discussion, absolutely feel free to bring it up. If it's something that you just would rather send in a written format for consideration in the final, that would be fine as well. Staff would like it either way.
Before we go to questions, I've been thinking about what we talked about before about the DWR meeting on the 20th. I think we should go ahead and reschedule our meeting now, because whether or not they're in agreement with the recommendations, I think we're going to have somebody at least attending that. So I'm just wondering if deferring that meeting to July 27th works for everybody.
Well, it's probably worth, I was going to do this after public comment, but if we're looking at calendars, perhaps we can also look at a special meeting at the end of June to adopt the annual
Brad, you
report.
already had that on June 30th, I think.
Yeah, if June 30 works for everybody.
Why don't we confer? I would think let's get through a couple comments on.
Right. I just want to lay that out before.
And then let's make those decisions.
I think I just wanted to lay that out. So yeah, I agree with that. But I just think that will be a critical component, and I think starting that discussion, obviously, it's going to take more than one meeting. So
yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Sorry to get off task on that, Bill.
I was just curious, we talk about trends, triggering points or trends. Are we going to actually put specific numbers on the metrics to say we have to act now?
I think those action points are most meaningful when there are specific values. So that would be staff's perspective. We did that at the district level, and it's been very helpful. It's measurable. Takes some of the emotion out of it if you figure it out beforehand. So it's been a helpful tool.
Thank you.
Okay. Bruce? Or Mark?
Yeah, just a general comment that it's a great start. I think it's in the right direction. There's a little bit of uncertainty on the budget aspect of it and what's been done to date, especially in regards to Table 10.2. The discussion prior to that talks about October 12th from the County Board of Supervisors, and it's just not clear if this is up to date as far as what's been done, what's going to be done. I just was a little unclear on that table right there, and
it's probably worth having me just briefly walk you through the source of that information. Table 10.2 is the current adopted implementation plan that the Board of Supervisors acted upon as the framework for their water conservation plan.
Within the wastewater project.
Within the wastewater project.
So that's specific to the wastewater project.
Right. Table 10.3 is a current update as to the status of what funds have been spent and on what, provided by the county, again, as part of the wastewater project. And Table 10.4 is a restatement of the draft programs that this committee reviewed in April. So maybe we can make that flow a little better, but that's how that was assembled.
Yeah, 10.2 and 3 are for the prohibition zone, and then 10.4 is basin-wide.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think that may help clarify things.
Yeah, that helps.
I didn't know if Mr. Zimmer had more. I tend to agree it should be real clear that 10.2, 10.3 are wastewater project, right. Not just prohibition zone, but wastewater project specific. Provide certainly a good template, and perhaps by the time we finalize that, I don't know if Mr. Hutchinson, when he expects to have any kind of formal understanding of where we are on our conservation numbers, but preliminary indications are that we're in very good shape on doing that. My comments are, that again, first of all, the contingency plan. I think that's obviously a very important piece of work. In terms of numbers, I think we have a good model in a wholly separate water system as Zone 3, which is Lopez Lake and the South County water retailers. We have a low water release plan, low reservoir level plan. So when Lopez Lake gets to a certain state, then we specify that certain things will happen in terms of changing the deliveries out of that, both to the water retailers and the downstream use. So I think that kind of thinking is a good framework in which to do. The second thing is that the point of this chapter being adaptive management, and as Mr. Miller lined it out in the beginning, one of the key questions, or the key question, is do we need to change anything? And I think it would be helpful, because this is going to be part of an annual report, that in some place, perhaps in the beginning of this chapter, be a real simple dashboard, if you will. It answers that question. What are we going to do next year? Well, we're going to continue along the path, or we're going to do what we have been doing, changing it. And one thought that I had is, if you look on the second page of this, you have Table 10.1, which is the Basin Plan metric summary. It shows the goal. It shows the calculated values. It might be an interesting idea to extend that table out, indicating what actions are going to be taken and whether they deviate from plans already on. But if you look right below Table 10.1, we have 5 different programs: monitoring, efficiency, and reinvestment, water reinvestment, the infrastructure, and the wellhead protection. Maybe we just add a column in each of those programs, for each of those programs, and indicate for each of the metrics what we might be doing to help drive the metric to where we want to get.
I like that very much.
You made allusion in your presentation to the executive summary, and I agree with Mr. Gibson that we need something up front that's going to be very easy for someone to take a snapshot of what we're really doing, rather than having to wait through it. So have we begun work on that executive summary yet? And will we see that for our special meeting in June?
You will. We'll post that the Friday before the meeting, if we're able to stay on schedule. That's our current plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Before we go to public comment, just for the record, we did receive a 12-page letter from the Sierra Club regarding these comments, so dated June 14th. So I just want to acknowledge that we did receive that, and those comments will be taken into account as we go to our next hearing on this item.
Yes, staff has reviewed that letter, and many of the key next steps that are identified here today are related to the content.
So I want to just express our appreciation for that letter and the fact that it has been read and incorporated.
Right. Very good.
Okay. So now we'll go to public comment. You have 3 minutes, so let's go.
Before my time starts, can you put up condition 6? Okay. get there in a minute. On the table 10.5, the Los Osos upper aquifer well, when you say fully funded, are we talking fully funded of this initial drilling step? We're not talking about the entire project at this point, right?
Correct.
Okay. He's nodding his head yes, for those that can't see. Because I think that's a discussion when we get to budget hearings for the Los Osos CSD based on revenue projections from final numbers for this last fiscal year going into revenue projections for next fiscal year. So I just think that's something that needs to be considered. The water conservation table 2, and then what actually has been done on the next page, vast disparity about what the projections were that this consultant came up with and what's actually been done to date. And I brought this up in the past. There's a number of items here that have not even remotely been started and are in the outlying years. So again, we have this money at this point. It's available through the project. Don't put all your eggs in one basket of having this money released to another purpose and put all our eggs in this basket about this vote in the spring of next year getting approved. Because if that vote doesn't get approved and this money's already put off to another purpose for the wastewater project or just eliminated, we basically have nothing at that point. I think every effort needs to be made to implement this program completely. Make sure that everyone in town that's part of the wastewater project prohibition zone has done their toilets, shower heads, aerators, every availability of replacing washing machines. I mean, the projection was 2,000 by this consultant. We didn't come up with this number. The public didn't come up with this number. A consultant that was paid a lot of money came up with these projections based on their expertise. We've done 101. My last comment, dealing with condition 6. Marshall made a very good point about conclusive evidence indicating adequate water supply available to support development. I think there's another word in there. I think we have to define what adverse impact means. Because if we make progress and we reduce seawater intrusion, but we haven't stopped it, is that adequate? Or if it can be proven that building 100 homes will have an adverse impact on the basin down the road, if we have 3 years of drought, is that an adverse impact? I think it would be. I think those two terms are very open-ended, conclusive and adverse. They have to be defined because if you remember, there was a wastewater project that was supposed to be implemented in the 80s. There was a promise it was going to happen, and building was allowed. There were 1,100 and some homes built in this community in the 80s.
Okay.
Based on, can I just finish?
Yeah, just, we don't have a...
Oh, yeah, you didn't turn the clock on.
We just got to...
That's my bad.
Think if those 1,100 homes weren't here right now, what the current state of the basin would be. Would we have this level of seawater intrusion? Would we have this? Would we be having a lot of these discussions, possibly? So let's make sure, before we start building, that we have a sustainable basin with conclusive evidence that there will be no adverse impacts in the future. Not just based on a model, conclusive evidence.
Okay, thank you.
I can do that.
You can do it, so I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Any other public comment on this item? Jeff? I like the light better than me having to do it.
I think the light helps the speaker. Sorry.
Yes, I do too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards. I wanted to expand a little bit and underscore this concept of trends. And clearly the trends that we're seeing, both in terms of demand, urban demand, and the projected supply, are figures that weren't contemplated by documents like even the Basin Management Plan or the Community Plan. For example, the Community Plan contemplates demands up over 4,000 acre-feet per year. Well, currently our safe yield, as you know, is 2,450 acre-feet. So we're much lower than these plans ever contemplated. So I think it frames a much simpler problem for us. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, I think with some very basic steps that are not expensive, we're talking $5 to $15 million instead of $35 to $50 million. With some very basic steps, we can get our arms around this issue, that is the seawater intrusion problem. And I think we can do this and maintain basin yield metrics in the 80s. Obviously, 80 is our target goal. That might be a little bit optimistic, but I think that in essence, even with build-out figures, the current supplies with modest increases are going to achieve reasonable basin yield metrics. And so I think the key in my message to you folks is that we've been pushing around a lot of paper. We've got lots of reports already. This committee's been meeting for 7 months, and we've got 5 reports that I can count, and I won't enumerate them. But we have to start getting some pipes in the ground, and as I mentioned last time, I challenged this group to get 1 well in, and now it's down to 17 months. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the committee. Who'd like to start? Or does anybody have any comments? I mean, I do. I think, let me just start now.
Yeah.
I think that Richard raises a good point. Not only is it the conclusive evidence that's a critical component of that Condition 6, but it's also the adverse impact. So I think that those do need to be addressed in both how we're going to finalize our language and how we react to that condition. So other than that, I think it's a good step forward, and look forward to finishing and finalizing this. So, Bruce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think in terms of adverse impacts, I think we should look closely at the policy discussion as to whether the undesirable impacts that are specified within SGMA are not exactly those measures that we want. That gives a very precise definition, and since this basin will have one way or another to comply with SGMA, I would really urge us to go within the framework that the state is putting forward to drive that, because the ultimate goal is exactly what we want, is a sustainable water supply.
No, I think that's a good point. Whether or not we're exempt basin or not, that right. Definition will be accepted.
Those should be. I mean, I would certainly. I'm going to be working, through our state association and at the state level to try to work that policy consistency, because it's going to be a whole lot easier for local jurisdictions to interact with their regulators if we have some kind of sense about that. Other than that, I think you've received the comments of the committee here, and look forward to seeing this go forward.
Yeah. Mark? Yeah. You already made yours. Bill, you got anything to add? Okay, so do we want to talk about schedule now, or carry that way to the end of the meeting?
Now would be greater. We might forget, and that would be that.
So you had talked about bringing this back on June 20th.
June 30th.
Pardon me, June 30th.
Yeah, we're still working on venue. The South Bay Community Center has some flexibility on.
Yeah, my only issue is I'm going to have a special meeting of my board on the 30th, starting at 3. So
it would need to be. I think we can be in and out in an hour. One agenda item, the annual report, maybe hour and a half.
Good. Yep.
Well, if we could start at 1, then that would give us enough time. So could we?
Yeah, that would be best for me too, to start at 1. I have a commitment in the afternoon, so if we could start at 1 and be out by 2, I could make it.
Or 2:30.
2:15.
I got to look that.
We could do it by 2.
We should be able to do it because it will be circulated ahead of time, and so we're going to get comments to Rob prior to that. So
that'd be fun.
Okay, so let's shoot for June 20th at 1 with location to be determined.
Thank you.
And then
June 30th.
Pardon me,
June 30th.
I keep saying, I know. And I even wrote the 20th. I don't know why I have that in my mind. So then, what about rescheduling our next regular meeting to the 27th?
Works for me.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Staff's okay on
1:30
on that day. 1:30?
Yeah.
If it's okay with Mark.
Yeah, 1:30 on the 27th is fine.
Okay, so let's just, I think because it will be critical, like I said, for at least some of us to be in attendance at that water board hearing. So let's just go ahead and schedule our next regularly scheduled meeting for July 27th, and then a special meeting at our regular time. And Rob, if you can check on the location, but at our regular time, 1:30, and then we'll have our special meeting scheduled for June 30th at 1 o'clock at a location to be determined. Yes. Okay. All right. With that then, Rob, we'll move to action item 7B, which is the Water Conservation Program update.
Great.
While you're doing that, I'll also point out that we did receive a letter from the Sierra Club on this item too, which I thought, again, those comments were very well framed. There was this very, very short letter, though, compared to the other letter. But and I do want to thank you. That postcard did go out about the repurposing.
I received mine, yes.
And quite frankly, before you get into that, I've met with 2 contractors in the last few days, and there's still some education required with some of them on repurposing, but we'll deal with that.
Great.
So anyways, so we'll move to your item then, which is 7B.
Very good. Wanted to give you a few introductory thoughts. One is to remind both the committee and the public that this is, in essence, a working committee. And so staff has been careful to bring documents and some pretty well thought out things to the committee for consideration. But there are times when, in order to advance things and do a little bit of rolling up of our sleeves, we'll from time to time bring you items that don't necessarily have all the definition in place. So I'm confident that with the very helpful group we have in the room that will be fine on this item. So the next steps in the area of the conservation plan, we discussed program elements, draft program elements in April, including proposed rebate measures. We've received some comments in the recent Sierra Club letter, and we've got quite a bit of public comment on file from that April meeting. But in order to advance this, the issues of funding and implementation are the clear next steps. We've heard a couple comments in previous meetings from purveyors asking about budget commitments. Of course, each of the entities has their own budget cycle with limited funds, trying to accomplish basin plan projects at the same time. And the county has, as we mentioned in our previous staff report, indicating a willingness that with some leadership from this committee, there could be a consideration for looking at remaining funds for certain conservation activities that are within the prohibition zone. And so we put together these next steps carefully based on our understanding of the different conditions. And I won't belabor those, but I did bring the text of those, the relevant text of those conditions, which I plan to put on the screen here and briefly walk through, so it informs our discussion as we move forward. So the first thing I think that needs to be done is to address conflicts, if there are any, with coastal development permit conditions and get some sort of confirmation from coastal staff. That could be, a letter. Doesn't necessarily have to be a coastal commission action, but just a read that we are interpreting those conditions consistent with commission staff. And I'll talk about what that specifically means here in a bit. And then for this committee to adopt and or amend the measures that were recommended in April. We restated those in the annual report so they'd be memorialized, but they're draft measures at this point. We've gotten some comments on those, and the committee would need to identify those as being the measures that we need to move forward with and the programs we want to move forward with. So that is one element where you can provide key leadership as the appropriate representatives of all the stakeholders to move conservation forward. Unrelated to those programs in terms of rebates is this idea that we can do more right now within our existing allocated budget for this committee, our annual budget. We've spent about $1,800 or so on the mailing of that postcard. So you just get a sense for how many properties you could cover with a postcard, which is a pretty efficient means of communication. I mean, my postcard has been sitting on my table now since I got it, and those tend to hover. So it is an effective means, I think. I've gotten positive feedback from community members, though I'm interested if folks from the public could give us some context there too. So one idea that staff had is to reach out to properties outside of the collected area using your allocated BMC budget and just identify the rebate programs that today are available to them. There's Cash for Grass, easy to do. 5 picture, I mean, it was easy for me, but it's doable and available. There's existing Golden State Water Company rebates that have been on the books for quite some time. You can get, there's a toilet rebate program, there's other programs that are available, but a reminder that we are in a critical water supply condition, that seawater intrusion is ongoing, that these programs are available, I think would be one step that we could take to communicate with these folks and let them know that we are indeed thinking about them. In looking at the coastal development conditions, the goal would be to make sure our interpretation of these conditions, which staff has taken a broad view looking at the totality of the document, we feel that a strong argument can be made that there's a framework for allowing additional conservation measures, indoor and outdoor, and that the conditions would allow it. But I wanted to walk you through some of the specific language so you know why we've come up with that conclusion. And the first is this condition 5B. This may not be exhaustive. I may not have hit every condition, but these are the key ones. So the water conservation program required by the county project, which limits indoor water use to no more than 50 gallons per person per day on average within the basin, shall be incorporated into the recycled water management plan. That's a separate document that the county's prepared. The program shall be designed to help basin residents to reduce their potable water use as much as possible, so we can do better than the 50, through measures including but not limited to retrofit and installation of low water use fixtures and gray water systems. So you have this reference to outdoor use right here in this condition. And we'd argue that a lot of the programs we're trying to put in place are substantially conforming to that intent. Continued, the program shall include enforceable mechanisms designed to achieve its identified goals, including the 50 gallons per person per day target, and shall include provisions for use of the $5 million commitment by the permittee to initiate water conservation measures pursuant to the basin plan as soon as possible following CDP approval. Permittee shall coordinate with water purveyors to the maximum extent feasible to integrate this conservation program with purveyor implemented outdoor water use reduction measures. And there you see a call for the purveyors to also take a leadership role. And one way to do that, of course, is for this group to be a clearinghouse for how these programs are structured and put together. An excerpt from Special Condition 2 that talks about septic tank decommissioning, where I just pulled a piece out. The plan, meaning the septic decommissioning plan, shall provide a process for evaluating septic systems for possible on-site reuse, including for on-site filtration and percolation of stormwater to the degree feasible and appropriate, and a process for implementing such conversion or for implementing appropriate abandonment measures depending on which measure property owners choose. So certainly within the coastal development permit, there's lots of foresight in terms of septic tank repurposing, this one primarily focused on stormwater percolation. Conditions 87 and 88 primarily deal with wetlands monitoring. So the plan includes provisions for monitoring groundwater levels, surveys for wetland plant and animals, bear with me here, monitoring wetland hydrology and water quality, appropriate response procedures, and at the end, and an educational program to encourage property owners to convert septic systems into areas capable of groundwater recharge. There's certainly been a lot of public information to this intent. And I won't read this one in its totality, but there's a sister condition in Condition 89 that talks about evaluating in the fourth line from the bottom whether existing on-site wastewater disposal facilities have adequate capacity and depth to groundwater to accommodate and percolate stormwater. And again, this goes to the county's efforts to educate the community on the benefits of septic tank repurposing. I'll have these conditions available in the midst of our discussion. Won't necessarily read all of Condition 99, but this one also reiterates that a program should be developed and that meets the 50 gallons per capita per day, and that the applicant shall provide $5 million of funding towards a water conservation program for, and this is one of the areas where consistency will be important. Look at the language there. The applicant shall provide $5 million of funding towards a water conservation program for indoor water conservation. Incentives shall be provided to homeowners and other property owners who install these measures within the first year. So here's a place where maybe we have a little inconsistency between one of the special conditions and one of these conditions in the body of the permit that came from our own County Planning Commission. And so what we don't want to have happen is that we identify some dollars, those get spent on outdoor programs, and commission staff comes back and says, oh, this says you need at least $5 million towards indoor, and here you've spent some on outdoor. We want to see you spend additional dollars on indoor. I think that's a remote possibility, but it deserves a focused letter and response from commission staff to make sure that as we harmonize these, because whenever these things happen, you don't necessarily get it perfect, to make sure those gray areas are addressed. And so one way forward that staff is hoping to take is that this committee would look at the programs that have been put before you in April and ultimately adopt those programs, that the county would receive some level of protection by written response from coastal staff to make sure that we're interpreting these conditions correctly so there's not additional liability for the prohibition zone, that the BMC would take the lead in structuring these programs as you have in April, so that it's not just the county doing that, but as it says in the condition that the purveyors would be involved in these programs, there'd be leadership here to do that. And then ultimately that, like we did with the postcard, we take advantage of a very, I think, helpful county staff structure in implementing the programs and having that existing structure available to efficiently implement. So those are some of the concepts, and we wanted to move this item forward as best we could today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have questions before public comment?
Mr. Chairman, let me just comment. I appreciate Mr. Miller bringing forward the conditions out of the CDP, and I think it really speaks to what I've mentioned to this committee on a number of occasions. I think the fastest way forward for this committee is to structure a robust water conservation plan led by the water purveyors that has nothing to do with the wastewater project. We get hung up on the thought that we somehow need to tap into the wastewater project to secure funds to actually run a water conservation program. I don't think that's necessary. There are other measures by which the county might be able to front some money to get something going. And since it would be the purveyors working with the county on behalf of those who are not covered in a purveyor service area, to put forward that, I think we can come up with a funding plan, and if funds are needed early, I'm certainly willing to advocate to my colleagues through the flood control district funds that might be available for us for some startup funding that could get this going in a hurry. If we do this completely separately, we just don't have to deal with permit condition compliance or any other aspect of the complicated CDP process. And really where we're targeting, I think, is areas outside the sewer service area and outside conservation, which, Condition 99 makes clear we're targeting indoor use. So what I'm thinking is let's just get the wastewater project finished. Let's get everybody connected. That's one set of work plans. The other set of work plans is for this committee to craft a very strong conservation program. We can base it on what we have done as part of the wastewater project, and let's figure out how we fund it, and let's move forward on that. So I don't think we have to wait to get possible confirmation from the Coastal Commission. This is a wholly separate issue. That's the principle that I've been trying to establish here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate Bruce's comments and agree with what he's saying. I think that the key thing that we really need to understand is how it applies to the basin management plan right now. I mean, we really need to look at that. We looked at the CDP, but we need to look at how it applies to the plan. And I think that there's some reference in there that we need to consider and look at, openly from all sides of how that is stated. And just looking at some of the comments or some of the line items that you put in here about, I think the big question is assuming the responsibility. Who's going to do that? Who's going to do that right now? How do we get this rolling today? Because every day that's lost is time lost on conservation. So really, the funding aspect of it, I think that there is reference in the basin plan about the county taking the lead role on starting some of this conservation and moving it forward, and then it transitions over to the purveyors. I understand that there's a contingency. We need to work together. We're ultimately here to work on the basin together as a team. How we do that, I think that all the purveyors and everybody's open to that. But I think ultimately we need to be clear about what we're stating and how it pertains to the basin management plan. So if we could some way have an update on that or some type of I'm open to ideas of how we track that and really implement it in the most productive way possible, with the funding that on behalf of Golden State that I would be able to commit to right now, and looking at all of our options. Is there some opportunity that the county would be willing to step forward? Is there some potential, I know you mentioned you wanted to keep the wastewater separate, but is there some opportunity to have some of those funds come into the basin management, at least to get this kicked off and rolling? I think just, I know what your position is on that, but I think that just working and having an open mind towards that, I think there's a lot of public comment coming that way. So definitely willing to work, and I think we all are here to implement this the best way possible.
Yeah, and I think we should go to public comment before we get too deep into this, but I think this is a valid point. There is a series of inconsistencies in the Coastal Commission conditions. I mean, nobody's going to question that. And even if you just look at the last sentence there, it says incentives shall be provided who install conservation measures within the first year. So does this go away after the first year?
Right.
And when does that first year start? I mean, so I think that's something that has to work really on a separate track of how we deal with the Coastal Commission. But I think Bruce's suggestion, what we can do as far as the Basin Management Committee and working with funds available, whether they be from the county or from other sources, to get us rolling on this rather than, being caught in a bureaucratic mess, for lack of a better term, is the way to go.
So 2 points to that. One of them is, and at the risk of repeating myself more than I do naturally, there are funds other than in the wastewater project that we can consider mobilizing to this just as speedily. It does not need to be the wastewater project. Second, I would submit that the county has done an extraordinary job getting water conservation going through the requirements that were imposed on the wastewater project. And, we meaning ratepayers within the sewer district, have spent nearly $1 million doing a remarkable amount of conservation that apparently, unofficially, has gotten indoor use under the 50 gallons per capita per day. And in fact, that Condition 99 was approved along with the special conditions on June 10th, if I remember, 2012, and within the first year we were providing incentives to homeowners. So we've been on this for quite some time. We've had exceptional success in it. We're happy to continue building on that success, getting at things that the purveyors can help, in fact, should help and should lead with. And so I'm totally here as part of your team in getting this going, including representing individuals who are outside your service areas, to which I think are going to be an important part.
Right. No, Rob,
just one staff level comment before we go to public comment, and that is one challenge in the basin plan itself as you look at consistency is the purveyors didn't have a cohesive vision of outdoor conservation at the time of the drafting of the basin plan. And that's one thing that we've together tried to formulate in cooperation with the unique timing we have for septic tank repurposing. How can we reduce outdoor use? Golden State's had some existing programs in place for quite some time. The district has some framework that they've worked on, but no cohesive outdoor plan is stated in the basin plan. So we are really trying to quickly put that together here to take advantage of the unique timing that we have right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we all acknowledge that the Basin Management Plan is a living, breathing document, and it's going to have to change as facts change. But timing is crucial, as I think everybody agrees with that. So,
right.
Okay, with that, then we'll go to public comment on this item 7B, the Water Conservation Program update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board or committee members. Again, my name is Jeff Edwards. And clearly, a next generation conservation plan is in order. It's how it's shaped, I think, is the question. And we have a very effective retrofit program right now. Title 19 of the county code provides a very good framework for a conservation plan. With modifications to Title 19, I believe we could achieve everything we're looking for. One of the provisions could be that when the last sewer connection is made, then it's activated, and the entire basin becomes available for additional conservation. It could be indoor and outdoor. That could be shaped by the modifications to Title 19. So I don't believe we need to reinvent the wheel here to achieve, again, a next generation plan. I don't believe a conservation plan the cost should be borne by the purveyors. I think the purveyors need to use their resources to implement water resource projects. So I don't believe they should be burdened. Neither do I believe that the county should be burdened. I think this should continue to be a private sector driven project or a program. And so I think it's that simple. Again, I think the program could be passed in advance and activated with the last connection, therefore eliminating any conflicts with the wastewater project, which I would agree with Supervisor Gibson that separating this next generation plan from the existing plan is a good thing. So, but let's, again, not reinvent the wheel. Let's use Title 19 with modifications to move forward.
Thank you.
Richard Margetson. The purveyors, if they take on this program, what does that mean to the ratepayers? It's going to be an increased cost on your budget. You got to fund it somehow, and that usually means rate increases at some point down the road. Bruce, I believe, doesn't want an opinion from the Coastal Commission, and it's my understanding that couple members of Sierra Club have already had discussions with the Coastal Commission, and they're open to opening this condition to a revision. I think before you make any decision, you got to get that, and I don't think it's a 6-month, 8-month, 10-month process. I think we're talking a communication, if the county wants to be proactive and have that conversation, and the Basin Management Committee through Rob wants to have that conversation, I think it can happen pretty quickly. I think you need an answer on that. The money that's in the Water Conservation Program is cheap money. It's cheap money. If this has to be fully funded by the 3 purveyors, it's going to be more expensive money over time. And the residents of the Prohibition Zone have actually spent more than $1 million. Your report today says $907,000 has actually been provided for rebates. But we're almost at $1.5 million in total out of the plan has been spent. That difference was administration for this plan. So we have a massive cost for coming up with the plan. We have a massive administration cost, and now we're just going to kind of throw it away because we've hit 50. The plan didn't hit 50. The number of acre feet of reduction of consumption for the two major purveyors in this basin way outnumbers the estimates in the conservation plan if all of the measures in the conservation plans were implemented. If all of them were implemented, you're talking less than 300 acre feet. Consumption between the two purveyors has come down way more than that, probably more than double that in the last 3 years. So let's be realistic. Get that opinion from the Coastal Commission before you go forward with taking something to the ratepayers again, because those are the ones that eventually will pay for this. And remember, this is cheap money.
Any other public comment?
My name is Lee Harry, and I'm an alternate member of this committee, but I'm just speaking as a property owner today. I just want to say I've been in this business for over 40 years, and this conservation has always been a key component of a large or small water company. We incentivized our rates. We called it rewarding the people that conserved, and I made the mistake once of in public calling it penalizing the people that didn't. So I got water over the coals for that. So my only point is the 50 gallons per person per capita per day has been published by the State Department of Health Services as the minimum requirement for public health. So I agree. Right now I've let all my landscape die. I'm just using the minimum water indoors. My water use is below the 50 gallons per capita per day. But I'd like to maybe recommend that we do get some input from the health department about whether or not they have changed their status on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee. You have a comment, Rob?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think our next step as staff would be to understand what sort of framework with the county might be available for, the mention was made of flood control district funds, or how those may relate to this topic.
Yeah, Bruce, you want to?
Let me just give you the general outline. The flood control district gathers some $3.8 million a year be spent on a variety of things. It is the flood control and water conservation district of the county of San Luis Obispo. And those funds have been deployed to jumpstart a number of water-related projects, most recently planning for the necessary infrastructure to bring desalinated water out of the Diablo Canyon power plant to the South County water purveyors. The expectation is that that money would be put forward out of the Flood Control District's general fund with repayment by the ratepayers if this project goes forward. It's very much the same model that was used by the county's general fund to the tune of some $8 million to get the wastewater project going. So it's that framework that I bring forward, and I would point out to my colleagues on the committee that in terms of your purveyors, I know Golden State has a rebate program going. It'd be interesting to see what the CSD could put together and how S&T might play on that. I would point out that in terms of a first year's budget, it might be a fairly modest amount of money as the uptake of these conservation measures takes some time to get going. What I've indicated in public is I would certainly advocate, this is going to take 3 votes or maybe 4 votes on the Board of Supervisors, to mobilize funding from the Flood Control District to start a robust conservation plan that this committee would be putting forward. I would only bring it to my colleagues under the understanding that as we develop our special tax measure to go out, that these funds would be repaid, because conservation is clearly one of the key components of implementing the basin management plan. And as we look to assess the cost of all the basin management issues fairly to members of the basin, that special tax is going to be an important component of that. So what I'm indicating is that I think we can bridge the time between when this committee puts forward its plan for conservation to the time when revenues from whatever source are available to fund it sustainably. And I think we can move fairly nimbly if we put forward a rock-solid piece of conservation planning. So that's the framework that I'm operating in, and I'm happy on behalf of my constituents, which are your constituents as well, to move that once we see what this committee approves as an aggressive conservation plan.
Thank you. Mark? Or Bill? Either.
So I think we need to, tie it back to the basin management plan and look at what's stated, clearly in our urban water use efficiency program. It outlines exactly what we're talking about, and knowing, that there is some, contingency there that when this plan was written, we're 4 years later, things have changed, but I still think that there's specific things that we need to follow that. And so I don't know if there could be a direction to staff to look at that and identify how do we move forward here as the Basin Management Committee, and what needs to be revised from the plan to this day. I think would be a fair start for that. And
staff can do that, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Above and beyond the wastewater conservation program, the idea of enhancing rebates for water-efficient washing machines, great idea. This committee has to decide what's the cost-benefit on those kinds of things. How much are we going to offer? What's our budget for this? But absolutely, I think we start where the wastewater project left off, and let's go for it. I'm totally on board with that idea.
No, I think what you're saying, Mark, and Rob, you got that comment down, but to look at what is in the plan and then what needs to be revised, what needs to be revised, that really is the context that we need to be operating under.
Right, because it's
the
already
basic management plan is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But what needs to be revised based on, again, it's a living, breathing document, and it is dated. There's no question about that. So let's do it. Bill?
I think we still need to also give some credit to people who have already jumped on this bandwagon and done it. I know for S&T, we've reduced our delivered water by 47% since 2013, and they're still going down. So we need to, and that's without incentives. We do have a water recycle rebate program. Unfortunately, very few people take up on that. It's a hard one for people to get their arms around hot water recycling, but and we'll continue on that, but we should just start giving out some credit for people who are really trying to conserve water in our communities.
Mr. Levin. Thank you. Okay, Rob, I just had really a technical comment because I think everybody's already covered what I wanted to talk about. But if we look at, and I went back to your last staff report, but Table 10.4 about the additional conservation measures under consideration. I had thrown something out last time that I'd like to see included or at least analyzed, not only with the water recirculating program, but just like the tankless water heaters, because my information that I got from the gas company was that both of those items save water equally. So,
Yeah, I think a tankless water heater would be equivalent to a hot water recirculation system.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that, because I brought that up last time, but I want to make sure that got added in there.
Good.
And I do think that time is of the essence in this particular thing, so the sooner we can move forward, the better it will be. But we also do have an adopted basin management plan that we do have to follow. So I think we'll put that back on your shoulders to report back at our next meeting. And then if you could talk to county staff and get that taken care of, I think it'd be great.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think you got good direction from the commission and some good comments from the public. So the last thing we have on our agenda is public comments for items not appearing on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, then we'll be adjourned till the 27th.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.